Britain fires its first H-bomb to join the United States and Russia as ranking atomic powers. The thermonuclear device was fired high over its target in the Christmas Islands, keeping fallout at a minimum. But the test added heat to the mounting debate over the safety of atomic tests and came to on the eve of renewed disarmament talks between Russia and the West. With a limitation on further atomic tests increasing in possibility, Britain has staked its claim to full status as a nuclear world power, perhaps none too soon.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire. These pictures of the ascending water column show the expanding cloud of spray at the base of the column moving outward and enveloping the ships in the target array. Great quantities of radioactive water from the column descended upon the decks of the nearby vessels, and ship hulls a mile away were drenched by the wall of foaming water. Photographic tower on Bikini shows the column composed of millions of tons of water rising at an initial rate exceeding the speed of sound. The water and spray from the explosion will fall for several minutes. Here again is an excellent photographic portrayal of the boiling, foaming wall of water engulfing the ships in the foreground. This highly lethal spray was intensely radioactive.
Between 1946 and 1958, the United States detonated 67 nuclear bombs in the Marshall Islands' northern atolls of Bikini and Eniwetok. At first glance, the Marshall Islands appear a peaceful, ecologically healthy, and isolated paradise, where skies are blue, where corals had been able to thrive, where turtles, sharks, fish are all in abundance. But more than any other place, the Marshall Islands is a victim of the two greatest threats facing humanity: nuclear weapons and climate change. The convergence is most symbolically epitomized at the Tomb, an unlined bomb crater on the island of Runit in Eniwetok Atoll. This is where the United States buried plutonium and other remnants of nuclear testing under an 18-inch thick concrete cap 39 years ago. The crater site, arguably one of the most destructive physical scars of the Cold War, is deceptively peaceful. The research team went around different islands in the northern atolls to test the background radiation using Geiger counters. In June, the researchers revealed that part of Rongelap Atoll, one of 27 atolls in the Marshall Islands, is as irradiated as some of the most notorious nuclear waste sites on the planet, including Chernobyl and Fukushima.
Today, more than ever before, our survival, yours and mine and our children's, depends on our adherence to ethical principles. Ethics alone will decide whether atomic energy will be an earthly blessing or the source of mankind's utter destruction. Where does the desire for ethical action come from? What makes us want to be ethical? I believe there are two forces which move us. One is belief in a last judgment, when every one of us has to account for what he did with God's great gift of life on the earth. The other is belief in an immortal soul, a soul which will cherish the award or suffer the penalty decreed in a final judgment. Belief in God and in immortality thus gives us the moral strength and the ethical guidance we need for virtually every action in our daily lives. In our modern world, many people seem to feel that science has somehow made such religious ideas untimely or old-fashioned. But I think science has a real surprise for the skeptics. Science, for instance, tells us that nothing in nature, not even the tiniest particle, can disappear without a trace. Think about that for a moment. Once you do, your thoughts about life will never be the same. Science has found that nothing can disappear without a trace. Nature does not know extinction. All it knows is transformation. Now, if God applies this fundamental principle to the most minute and insignificant parts of his universe, doesn't it make sense to assume that he applies it also to the masterpiece of his creation, the human soul? I think it does. And everything science has taught me and continues to teach me strengthens my belief in the continuity of our spiritual existence after death.
In 1956, 2,000 English troops came to the Gilbert Islands, to Christmas Island. They didn't come to fight another war, just to test some of their weapons. Preparations took about 10 months. All women and children left the island for about 4 months. The birds stayed to watch. Increased to 4,000, and 2 further tests were carried out in 1957, and some more in 1958. The birds who saw the test of the weapons, called H-bombs, never saw anything else again. Millions of them, blinded by a brilliant light, were unable to see to find food and starved to death. The troops left soon afterwards. The preparations were left behind. In 1962, the British came again, and the Americans. And 24 more H-bombs were tested. Again, the preparations stayed.
As far as the test program is concerned, they were drawn up and implemented with professional thoroughness, and they do bear favourable comparison with the standards that are in force today. There is a lot of evidence of the importance attached at the time to the safety of those who took part.
It is interesting to record that no one suffered by contamination and that no single item of equipment sustained unforeseen effects.
This film of the grapple tests has never been seen publicly before. It was produced by a Ministry of Defence film crew which covered every detail of the operation and was for armed forces' eyes only. The Ministry of Defence says it no longer exists. It shows men in protective clothing and says they were issued with radiation badges, though none are shown. It tells the soldiers that the tests were quite safe. But when they were first planned, total safety was certainly not the intention. These secret documents were produced by military advisors in 1953 to tell the government what the nuclear test should be used to find out. This report from May the 20th says,
"The Army must discover the detailed effects of explosion on equipment, stores and men, with and without various types of protection."
And just 2 months later, this document was drawn up by the Chief Medical Officer. It lists the data required for the military planning of tests, and it says they must show
the effects of beta burn radiation from direct fallout on troops and from fission products on the ground in highly contaminated areas.
These dancers have spent months preparing for this one moment, and it can be a very intense emotional experience. It is not uncommon for dancers or their watching families to cry out or even faint. Dance is at the very center of our culture. It speaks of what we are as a people. But it's not just a matter of learning the movements. The guidance of a good teacher is essential. Someone with good skills in dance, in storytelling, and in the use of traditional magic. With this support, a good dancer will fearlessly seize the moment. This dance is part of a family saga. It tells of a fishing contest between the various members. It was a very serious contest. The loser lost all, including his life. Many of the early missionaries were alarmed by dance, particularly its so-called satanic elements. On some islands, they attempted to ban it.
Starting tonight with a world exclusive in our backyard. What environmentalists warn is a Pacific disaster, what regional security experts are calling a major concern. These are the waters of one of the world's largest marine reserves, the Phoenix Island Protected Area, or PIPA, a World Heritage crown jewel. But now One News has discovered its gatekeeper, the Republic of Kiribati, is unlocking it, and some fear they're handing China the key. The location of this is critical. We're over central Kiribati now. This is the protected area, just over 400,000 square kilometres. And up there, a focus on Canton Island, a former US territory and Air Force base right next to American waters. If China sets up there, it gains not just a major military foothold in the region, but also control over vast and vital shipping lanes to the north. Here's our Pacific correspondent Barbara Drever with exclusive details.
One of the largest protected areas on Earth, but not for long.
It's going to cause a lot of ripples all around the world.
One News has obtained secret documents showing the Kiribati government is planning to open the marine reserve to commercial fishing. Cabinet has also decided to delist PIPA as a World Heritage Site. Devastating news for former President Anote Tong, who was instrumental in setting it up.
It's a huge blow to conservation in general, but I think it's a much bigger blow to our credibility as a nation.
The Kiribati government claims the reason for the radical move is so it can make $200 million a year in tuna fishing licences. Critics question that financial forecast and say it's more valuable as a marine reserve.
The ability for people to have any confidence in working with Kiribati like this in the future is going to be really diminished, and that's a real shame, because I think there are very important partnerships that can be developed with Kiribati that have PIPA as the centerpiece.
There's deep suspicion this has all been driven by China. In a shock move 2 years ago, Kiribati ditched its 23-year allegiance to Taiwan, instead signing up to China and the promise of a $66 million grant. PIPA is attractive to China, not only for its fishing wealth, but its strategically significant location, spanning 400,000 kilometres of ocean near islands with US military installations.
Kiribati obviously has real strategic value to China if it could potentially develop some strategic infrastructure on Canton Island, which had both commercial fisheries usage but also potential military usage as well.
China's already provided funding to help develop Canton Island, including upgrading an airstrip on the island. President Tanis Mamau has denied it will be used for military purposes, but it's feared China is gaining a tight grip on the financially vulnerable island nation. Kiribati has also signalled its intention to leave the Pacific Islands Forum, where leaders work and stand together for the good of the region.
Well, it simply means that China will have more and more foothold, and the more isolated Kiribati becomes, the more they play straight into China's hands.
There's hope the Kiribati cabinet will do a last-minute U-turn, but there's no doubt there's stormy seas ahead.
In other news, the Republic of the Marshall Islands may face financial sanctions from the United States after being placed under Tier 2 watch list for the second consecutive year in a row. According to the newly released U.S. State Department Trafficking in Persons report, the Marshall Islands is, quote, a source and destination country for Marshallese women and girls and women from East Asia subjected to sex trafficking. The report further claims that foreign business owners in Majuro are recruiting Marshallese girls to engage in prostitution with crews of foreign fishing and transshipping vessels. It also indicated possible involvement of government officials in trafficking, but did not provide details. The 2014 report further states that President Christopher Loyac and then Foreign Minister Philip Mueller acknowledged the existence of human trafficking through public addresses. The government also reportedly initiated an investigation involving women subjected to forced prostitution. However, the report asserts that despite these efforts, the government did not show evidence of increasing efforts to address human trafficking.
The Marshall Islands have dismissed the U.S. Trafficking in Persons report that placed the Marshalls on a global watch as a sex trafficking destination. Philip Mueller, RMI's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade, told Radio Australia's Pacific Beat that there is no human trafficking in the Marshall Islands. He says there may be one or two isolated incidents, but there is no prostitution in bars and no human trafficking. The 2013 TIP report claims that foreign women were reportedly forced into prostitution in bars that are frequented by crew members of foreign fishing vessels. But Mueller dismissed the claims, saying boat captains sometimes bring in their families to the Marshalls. He says he does not understand where the report is coming from, and further revealed to the Pacific Beat that the report went without input from the RMI government. He says the report is premature and baseless. The annual U.S. State Department report was released earlier last month.
The man who allegedly sent more than 100 asylum seekers to Australia on the boat that crashed onto Christmas Island has been arrested in Jakarta. Ali Hamid is known to authorities in both Australia and Indonesia. He was arrested on an immigration offence this afternoon. But in an extraordinary development, Indonesian police believe Hamid may be an Australian citizen.
The fact that the New Zealand servicemen, who were up to 200 kilometres from the actual blasts, show the same increase in leukemia as men stationed on Christmas Island itself points strongly to airborne radiation being the cause. In Australia, compensation is already being paid to servicemen contaminated by the ground blasts on the British range at Maralinga. Now the evidence is mounting that the so-called clean airbursts in the Pacific were anything but clean, and the price is now being paid in human illness and death.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that